Created, captured, rescued, respond. For the last few weeks, we've been diving into the Kerygma, which in Greek means proclamation. And as a verb, it means to herald the good news. The news that we were created by the first principle, the God of the philosophers, who also revealed to us that he's not only principle, but person. He's a loving father, a relational term, signifying that there was a relationship between God and man since the beginning. We have the news that we were captured by a hateful, spiteful enemy who loathes all of us, who loves to tear us down through seduction, through lies, and then through accusation, which began with our first parents in the tragic fall of man. And hope seems lost because we continually, as human beings, remain in our captivity of sin. Just look at the people of Israel, for example. How many times did God send them a message? How many times did he send them prophets, and they still would not listen? But we also have the news that we were and are rescued by the same loving God who chose to enter into our reality so intimately, to live like one of us in everything but sin. And he completed this rescue by being beaten, mocked, nailed to a cross, died, and rose again. That's a God worth believing in. So now we come to the final, but no less important, pillar of the Kerygma: respond. Knowing that we were created, captured, and rescued, now we are called to respond. The ball's in our court. Archbishop Sample has been making his own video series on the Kerygma. And when he talks about response, he says this: your decisions will determine your destiny. How are we going to respond to the Kerygma, to the good news? Will we open ourselves to draw closer to the call of our Creator and Rescuer? Or are we just going to continue about our lives like business as usual, like nothing special happened? Will you choose to believe? In the 1989 Steven Spielberg epic, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, our hero is in a race against time and evil, that is the Nazi regime, to claim the Holy Grail, this being the cup that Jesus used at the Last Supper, and according to the film, the cup that caught his blood at the crucifixion. Towards the end of the film, Indiana Jones, along with his companions, including his father, played wonderfully by Sean Connery, go to the temple together, where they must face 3 challenges to get to the Grail. At the final challenge, Indiana Jones finds himself before this opening. He walks through the cavern, he's at his entrance, and he sees the entrance of the Grail on the other side. But the problem there is, there's a bottomless pit in between him and the Grail, with seemingly no bridge. This final trial is actually called Path of God. And the clue in his father's diary, what he's been using as a map to get through these challenges, only says this: only in the leap from the lion's head will he prove his worth. So initially he's looking out at this jump. It's a long way down. It's a near bottomless pit. And he says, it's impossible. Nobody can jump this. But after brief consideration, he realizes it's a leap of faith. His father, who has been wounded by one of the Nazis, keeps repeating, "You must believe, boy. You must believe." And the scene is masterfully put by Steven Spielberg, where, putting his hand over his heart, taking a few deep breaths, and opening his eyes, Indiana Jones raises his leg and takes one step forward. How are we going to respond to the call of faith? We also are in a race against evil. Even though we are rescued, the enemy is going to stop us every single step of the way. where and who will we turn to? We're called to believe, to have faith. We are not called into blind submission to some moral code or some guru-like figure from history. We're called to believe in a person, to have a relationship with a person, the Word made flesh, who changes everything. And the Lord is never going to force any of us. He waits for our free response to believe, just like St. Joseph in the Gospel. In the United States, freedom is a reality seen as sacrosanct, like our Eucharistic reality. No one has the right to violate the Eucharist, just like no one has the right to violate my freedom. But unfortunately, in society today, freedom is seen in such a hyper-individualistic mindset among many people, where personal autonomy takes over so much that God seems rather external. He's maybe over there. He's not in relationship with me in my heart. Or he could even be misunderstood as the one who violates my autonomy, rather than being what he really is, the ultimate source of freedom, which is life with him. We belong to Christ, as St. Paul wrote to the church in Rome. We don't belong to him like a piece of property, some item to be put on display. We don't belong to him as slave to master or captive to captor. We belong to him as beloved to lover. Father John Riccardo speaks of how at the heart of the gospel there are two words: you matter. He also says, in other words, to say I love you to somebody is to say you're worth the trouble. If you look again at the arms of Christ on the cross, he's open, ready to welcome even the most skeptical and weak of faith. It's almost as if he's saying to the enemy, this world and everyone in it belong to me, not you. Father Riccardo also says that the proclamation of the gospel is that Jesus is Lord, not the enemy, nor the leaders of the many nations today. Jesus is Lord. This is a God worth responding to with your yes. Now, all of us are each on our own journey of faith, and the Lord is asking you to respond from where you are at, not just the person next to you. And please don't fall into the trap of comparing yourselves to others. That person is so prayerful, they seem so in tune with God, and I'm barely hanging on here. What do they have that I don't got? Don't do that. In fact, in the book, The 12 Rules for Life, Dr. Jordan Peterson titles the fourth rule as this: you can only compare yourself to who you were yesterday, not who someone else is today. Don't think that because your faith is lacking or that it's struggling, that there's no point of opening yourself to believing in Christ. Again, in his video series, Archbishop Sample praises the fact that you realize this, because now you're receiving a very special insight. Faith is a gift, and a gift we should never stop asking for, in light of the holidays especially. Again, our response of faith is not blind submission. It's a well-reasoned act of the will with your whole heart, your whole mind, your whole strength, your whole soul, your whole person. That's taking your first step towards a life radically altered in Christ. So if you're struggling with your faith today, don't hold back like King Ahaz. Please bring this desire to the Eucharist. Ask him when you receive the Eucharist today. And if you are a person whose faith is very strong, well-connected, first, thank God for that, because it didn't come from you, it came from him. It's a wonderful gift. And as an act of charity, ask for the increase of faith for your brothers and sisters here. We don't get to sit this one out. We have to make a response. And how we respond matters, because Jesus changes everything.